It's not a lot of people coming in. Some of y'all probably get this broadcast later when you get up, I guess. But it's been some. I wanted to continue this conversation because something came up in the news today, and I think it's one of the bigger red flags about the Democratic Party that we don't normally talk about. And one of the things we don't talk about with the Democratic Party is this gross mismanagement of funds. And I know I guess in most institutions, there's always that one person that is responsible for the budget of a campaign or budget of a fundraiser. And many times in this political party, you've seen so much money being raised only to see it be mismanaged. And, you know, the story really isn't any different than what I've seen in the past on a local level in terms of how Democrats run local cities. And usually, Democrats do good on a national level when it comes to managing fiscal responsibility. But when it seems like when Democrats run for local office, this is where things kind of, how I would say, get mismanaged. There's always stories of local politicians mismanaging funds or mismanaging large amounts of campaign finances. And there's been a story that has come out online by a news organization called Notice, and it's by Jasmine Wright. I'm going to put the link of this article so that my audience can actually go back and look at the article. And we're going to break down a lot of things, but this is one story and many a string of stories about Kamala Harris and her entire campaign, and also how she managed her staff within the White House when she was vice president. And, you know, when we talk about what went wrong, nobody talks about the infighting that goes on amongst Democrats. And this has been a recurring theme with the Harris administration and the vice president's office, and how they do not treat staff right, or staff feel minimized or completely disregarded by Kamala Harris. And also the controversy between her chief of staff and Simone Sanders. And we, and the sad thing is that this was never brought up during the campaign. This was never brought up as an issue. And if this had been brought up early on by the opposing side, she wouldn't have had a chance at even being able to run with the poll numbers that she had. But she was able to get things glossed over to where she basically didn't get held accountable for anything. But to bring it back to the local level, right? And this goes back to Democratic politicians because I'm from Baltimore. I've lived here all my life and I've seen what Democratic policies have done to Baltimore City. And you're seeing also what Democratic policies have done to places like Los Angeles and also Chicago and New York City. And you see there's a recurring theme where at the top the Democrats know how to run government, but then when it comes to the bureaucracy of certain organizations, they're never held to any type of accountability or fiscal accountability when it comes to where government spending is going and making sure government is run efficiently and making sure people get the resources that they need to fix their problems. You know, in Baltimore, we've had this recurring thing with Democrats. We've been a Democratic city for the last, I would say, 65 years, going all the way back to the last Republican um, that we had in Baltimore was Theodore McKeldin. Then after that, we had, of course, the Delisandros. And the Delisandros, of course, Tommy Delisandro, they called him Tommy D. There were two Delisandros, and then we had after the Delisandro saga, we had Schaefer, and Schaefer ran Baltimore from 1971 to 1987, and went on to go become governor of the state. And for a while, of course, things were being handled, and we had that uh, accountability there because everything was about getting it done, and that's what Donald Schaefer was all about. And Baltimore, people don't know is we're a machine type city, which means all the politicians are connected. And from history, it was either whites, Irish, or Italians that were running Baltimore, and they were all Democrats. And you see the same recurring thing with Chicago. It was mostly Polish and Irish and Italian people running the city. In New York, you had the same exact thing as the Polish, the Jewish, the Italians, and the Irish that ran the city. And then by the time we get to the 80s and 90s, that's when we had that black political we had a black political machine in Baltimore. And so we had Smoke, we had O'Malley, then Sheila Dixon, Rawlings, Pugh, uh, Jack Johnson, then of course right now Brandon Scott. So we've had mayor after mayor after mayor, and then things didn't get fixed in the city, and most of the government spending within our city, whatever money came into Baltimore, went to the development of the inner harbor. But to tie this back in to what's problematic with Democrats is how they spend money, and there's also misappropriation of funds. And I read this article right here by Jasmine Wright. It just came out about the Harris campaign. And I always like studying about government corruption. And I know it's not like a, a city thing, but I always like learning about government corruption. I learned about government corruption when I was in high school and learned about, Tammany Hall and Boss Tweed and all those guys. And I understood the interconnectedness of government and people. And the most important thing about local government is that it directly affects people like me and you. And when we talk about what's more important, is it your president or your local dog catcher? And most people would say the presidency, but it's not, because most presidents have limited amount of power. And if you think about what it means to be president does not have absolute power. President can enforce a law, but they cannot write law. They can pick judges. They could pick circuit court judges, but they have to have Senate confirmation. They have to go through the Senate. They have to be questioned. The picks have to be questioned by the Senate before they go to be confirmed as a pick. Presidents can not start wars without an act of approval from Congress. They cannot bypass Congress. That's a law. Presidents can write executive orders. They can write executive oversights, but they are not responsible for writing law. They could fire appointments. So they could fire somebody from the Treasury Department and put somebody else in. They can fire somebody from the United States Department of Defense. That's the purpose of the powers of the president and what they act upon. A lot of people have not taken American government seriously, and nobody has really understood a civics course, because a lot of people have been out of school for a very long time. But when it comes to being a president, one of the bigger responsibilities of being a president is the managing of the United States Treasury Department and the United States debt. Because when presidents come on, the things that they do could catastrophically impact our national debt. And that's one thing that people should be worried about, more so than how one might feel about a particular politician based off of what he says. And from this article that I read, it doesn't seem like Kamala Harris knows how to manage a $1 billion campaign chest. Now, if you can't manage $1 billion and you go $20 million into debt, that says something about you as a person, but it also says something about your leadership abilities. And it has nothing to do with your gender or your color. Being a president is not an easy task. And that's one of the reasons why some people would prefer a businessman run the country than to have a person that's just in politics run the country. Because businessmen know how to manage budgets. They always got to manage an overhead. So when we think about how one might manage a budget, how is it that Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris, was able to raise $1 billion and then blow through $1 billion only to become $20 million in debt after her campaign? That's a scary thing. And it's scary because what if she became president and couldn't manage the United States national debt? I think that would be very, very problematic. Then, you know, that would be very problematic if we gave her the keys to the United States Treasury Department and she mismanaged the United States Treasury Department, or she couldn't manage the US debt, because if you can't manage the debt, if you can't manage the debt, then you can't manage the United States. And I think a lot of people were afraid of what could happen, and then also what is currently happening with inflation. And I think that's what scared a lot of people into voting for Donald Trump. But I'm gonna go inside. We're gonna break this down. Look at this article. What says is broken since the beginning. What went wrong inside the Harris campaign, by Jasmine Wright. And Jasmine Wright is like an investigative journalist for uh, this news organization called Notice. And she did an investigative inside uh, exclusive on what was going on within the Harris campaign and what they were doing and spending, how they were spending a lot of money. But we're going to jump right into the article. It says in early October was supposed to be film fundraising videos for her campaign, which in a month's time would be defunct and in debt. Going over the script ahead of time, Harris read, "We missed our fundraising deadline." Then she stopped and told aides, "We can't lie to people," by saying they missed their fundraising goals, according to 4 people with knowledge of the conversation. One junior level aide later had to tell the Harris campaign chief of staff Sheila Nix, the truth. The campaign had missed its fundraising goals. There have been rumblings about the financial situation since September, said one Democrat. Another said that the campaign had missed its fundraising goal in September after money slowed in August and the boom from the convention wasn't as high as the campaign expected. Now, the second Democrat said Harris has begun to ask questions about where the money went. And isn't that interesting? How do you have all these aides around you and you don't know what the hell is going on? And I go back to an earlier article that was written by CNN back in September of 2021. That's, of course, Simone Sanders had left the vice president's office to, under certain circumstances, but she never, Simone Sanders did not specify why she left uh, Kamala Harris's office. But 2021, which was their first year, and her first year as vice president, there was rumors spiraling, circling around that Harris's office had been ran in disarray and chaos. And a lot of people within her office felt like there was a lot of infighting. And there was. But they tried to use a PR team to cover up the shit, even though it was already out there that her office had issues from the very beginning, 2021. And a lot of people, her aides, said that there was a lot of scolding going on in her office of staffers. And I think that might have went back to when they had young staffers in her office possibly working for her. But what was heard and what was told in the 2021 article that CNN wrote is that Kamala Harris had berated her staff. Now, I don't know how true that is, but it was written by CNN. And it was one of the primary reasons behind why Simone Sanders had left. And if you go back to the video where Charlemagne the God is talking to Vice President Kamala Harris, the very first year, where he's saying who's running the White House, and she responded in a very curtsy, very curt way, saying Joe Biden is still president, Joe Biden is running the White House. And it was like she kind of took offense to the question, but it was very legitimate question. And it just seemed like whenever anybody asked her a question about what was going on, she would try to kind of, you know, kind of run and gun it in a sense that she'll try to find a way to dance around the question and not give a direct answer. And this has always been her way of avoiding any kind of accountability on her part and how she messed up. But how do you not know, well, based on an article, how do you not know the people around you are mismanaging your campaign funds? How do you know you miss your campaign deadline? And that's so problematic because these are your people. These are people that you hired. So there has to be some type of responsibility on your part as to why the people that you had on your staff couldn't reach your fundraising deadline. Now, I'm going to get back into this article. She's asking questions about where the money went. Some blame the major hole on TV reservations and consultant contracts that were agreed to while President Joe Biden was still on the ticket and in charge of this behemoth organization that the Harris campaign then fulfilled. Others blamed a fear within the within the others saying it was a byproduct of the disorganization of a campaign that was unable to register voters' anger or find a persuasive message to answer it or effectively harness the momentum Harris generated until the very end. So when we go back to August and we go back to what went wrong, how they got this momentum, and this is where the stuff gets really problematic. They had all this momentum, and then for some odd reason, after the convention, they're standing on this hill, and then of course they can't deliver or register voters. That's very odd. You couldn't find a way to communicate effectively to turn out your base, even though you had raised $1 billion in between July and August before the convention. The smartest thing that would have done the Democratic Party some good is if they had an open convention, an open delegation count to see if she would have been a decent candidate and try to maybe run them against Gavin Newsom or something like that. I think that would have been a smart way to get people in line with Kamala Harris, as if they kind of would have run her against maybe Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom probably would have won. I truly believe that. Says, I'm amazed that we even got close, said one Democratic official chose close to the campaign. The campaign has been broken since the beginning. Nearly all of the more than dozen campaign aides, Democratic operatives, strategists, and White House officials Notice spoke with for this story rested the brunt of that punish the brunt of that punishment on the Biden administration and all those attached to it. Few, if any, Democrats or campaigns could have overcome that fundamental issue, they said. So, the mess that was created, which was Joe Biden, if he had stayed on a ticket, he probably would have had a chance of winning. Maybe. I think it was a all or nothing type of situation with the Democratic Party. It was a crisis on their hand even from the beginning. But then we go back to 2019, time when Trump was still in office, um, there could have been. I don't think Joe Biden should have never ran for president, and I'm of that camp that he was too old to even consider a run for the presidency. He had no business being on anybody's ticket. If he wanted to run, he should have ran in 2016. But in 2016, of course, everybody wanted Hillary. And we got her, and she lost. And then you try to put Joe Biden's old ass in there because you didn't like Bernie Sanders. Try to jam him in there. Does 4 years, and then nobody wants him anymore, which is crazy. Says they also blame Biden for staying in the race so long after he initially billed himself as a transitional candidate. And then once he decided he would campaign for re-election, for failing to articulate a case against Trump, and they blamed him for building a campaign with inexperienced aides who many who spoke to those believe weren't equipped for the Herculean task of getting an unpopular incumbent reelected. Mm. Like I said, going back, Joe Biden should have never stepped foot back into the political arena after he left the White House with President Biden, President Obama. It should have never ever happened, and that's problematic. That's very problematic. We dug out of a deep hole, but not enough. David Pauloff, senior advisor for Harris, wrote on X soon after posting the message. He deleted his account. But many also directed blame at campaign leaders like Jen O'Malley, Dillon, Harris, campaign chair, and her deputy, Robert Flurry. Foul, can't even mention that name. Falhurdy. Rob Falhurdy, which is her deputy, campaign manager, campaign chair. The Democrats who spoke to Notice say the campaign leadership failed the vice president by creating a campaign that was over reliant on analytics. How many times have we gone back to this thing about the polls? Everybody said that she was up in the polls. Same thing they said about Hillary. They said she was up in the polls. People love her. She was 10 points ahead. It was so insular and micromanaged, they say, that it required O'Malley Dillon to make all the decisions, with leadership resistance to advance or change from Harris aides, and they ultimately fault the leadership for being financially irresponsible. Again, you have too many people around you, you don't know, and you bear the responsibility and you bear the brunt of the responsibility. I mean, that's what's going to happen. It's like she just tried to run the campaign. She depended too much on her aides to run the campaign that she wasn't in control of any of it. And how do you get control of something that is out of your control? You know? Even the best, smoothest campaign operation isn't enough on its own to win an election, but in tight races with close margins in the right states, they can make a difference. And that's why the results are a little different. Then you have to say that she lost because of her campaign, said an operative close to the campaign. Well, I can't say that she lost just because. Like I said, you got to go back. Did you speak to the electorate? Did you speak to the people? Did you speak to inflation? Did you speak to the fact that people are living paycheck to paycheck? She didn't do it. She didn't learn anything from Joe Biden. She didn't try to distance herself from Joe Biden, but assumed that people were going to vote for her the same way they voted for Biden. And that's where she made her biggest mistake. And that's the hubris that comes out of that whole entire party, where they depend too much on analytics and idealism about what the electorate wants versus actually going out and actually talking to people, actually engaging with the electorate. They didn't do that. The other way to do it is maybe campaigns don't matter at all. They said, then why are we even campaigning at all on anything? But that's the problem. When you campaign, you're trying to sell yourself. And what Trump does very well, he knows how to sell you something. He knows how to be a businessman. When you're a businessman, in politics, you sell yourself. In business, you sell a product. Was she trying to sell her idealism to the people about how she's willing to tackle this economy? She didn't do that. She came out of this really thinking about herself in a sense, because she wasn't willing to do the work to actually engage with the electorate, to actually get into those spaces that Donald Trump actually went into. When you seen one of the biggest issues with the Democratic Party and why people have said they are so out of touch is because, remember when I said about social media and how important that was to the bigger picture of how we saw how we saw politicians? Because in the old days, if a politician wanted to reach somebody, they had to go on television. That's when televised debates became a thing. But then, of course, when it comes to social media, Obama was one of those first presidents to actually utilize Facebook, to utilize YouTube, to utilize, iPhones. And I know that Obama's campaign was more than 16, 17 years ago, but all of that matters. When Obama Girl came out and made that video, I Got a Crush on Obama, that catapulted Obama into popularity to where they didn't see color. They saw him as a person. And I think one of the biggest problems is now with social media being so popular, You have to figure out how to get into those spaces. If Kamala Harris had have done something like maybe do gaming, maybe play video games or stuff like that, go on some of if she had to go went on Joe Rogan, if she had engaged with the manosphere or something like that, she probably would have got more popularity. But it was she wanted to run on this feminist bent and this feminist rant. That's why she went to Call Her Daddy podcast, which was stupid. That's just the wrong way to do things. Is to play into that being the woman candidate running for president. And she leaned too much into that and completely alienated a lot of voters on her way up. Now, it says multiple sources who spoke with notice lamented how difficult it was to hire staff at the inception of Biden's reelection campaign. So, this would be at the very beginning of Biden's reelection campaign. Few wanted to work for Biden, and even fewer wanted to move to Wilmington, where the campaign was headquartered. One campaign aide said a few of those who were hired for senior roles were in reality years too junior for their responsibilities. Even when Biden was still on the ticket, aides who had run national campaigns noticed that the infrastructure was severely lacking. And when the candidate switched occurred, seasoned people who wanted to come on found it difficult to navigate the existing infrastructure. They believed that it was unlikely that Harris understood the teetering giant she inherited. And even if she did, it would have been too costly time wise to rebuild in 100 days. Hmm. And that's where all of this starts to fall apart during the switch. And when you think about the switch and the transition when Biden leaves, it makes all the sense in the world why you couldn't run that candidate. There was just no time. 100 days out, he should have stopped in July, at a week after he should have stopped in June. He should have stepped down in June. That way she could have had more time. But because he was reluctant and stubborn, and you had people like James Clyburn telling him to stay in the race. And this is why I was talking about these fucking minions like Clyburn, old 83-year-old man who's been in politics for maybe 50 years and forced this man to stay in office, jammed him in South Carolina, and then let him, told him to stay the course and kept listening to him to stay the course. And I don't understand nor get how the hell we let this man try to dictate to the president of the United States whether or not he should step down. He's not even a part of the staff. But yet, you have the gravitas to tell the president of the United States to stay the course, to stay in. And what if we had gotten to August and he left? It would have been an even bigger disaster. The Biden campaign was also not ready for the energy and support that rushed in from Democrats when Harris first took over. One operative outside the campaign told Notice that during the first hours after Harris got into the race, thousands of donors who contributed to Act Blue were prompted to tip the service after they donated. When asked by Harris aides if a volunteer resignation form could replace it to capture the newly interested Democrats, the campaign didn't have such a form available. The campaign said the link was added to the site several hours later and able to capture 170,000 volunteers that day. There were things that could not be operationalized because of the infrastructure was so limited, said a second outside ally. Another said it was impossible to scale up at the pace required to keep up with the surge of enthusiastic Democrats wanting to vote, volunteer, and give money back to Harris because of the complicated way the campaign was initially stood up by Biden. So we're talking about basically infrastructure problems early on in the campaign. Half of those people lived in battleground states, were therefore cut off not just from donating money but important information. That's really sad. So not only did you cut off, not only did you have the bad infrastructure, now you got an issue where voters in the battleground states that you need in order to win don't have a way to donate. The campaign said this was such a normal churn of voters in a list of more than 25 million. Because of its instability to get a mass amount of people to donate multiple times, the campaign continued to miss and revise its funding goals. Two operatives told Notice at one point the campaign even temporarily cut its mail program. Meanwhile, black men in Georgia were receiving more than 10 pieces of mail from Trump's team, per the operative close to the Harris campaign. So basically, in layman's terms, the campaign was a fucking mess. Not able to send out mail to your volunteers and your donors, but really the opposing campaign was able to have that infrastructure in place where they ran and they won. So if I were able to send out mails and letters consistently across the board, how do you think that would have went down? It is what it is. Somebody was able to reach their constituents faster than somebody that was just thrown in the muck of it all and wasn't able to get a handle on trying to target your donors. Of course, you can't blame black men for this shit. That's for damn sure. Harris then, it says, and Harris and asked to remain on as campaign chair. So, 10 pieces of mail. Fearing critical stories about staffing similar to those that plagued Harris's first campaign and first years as vice president, Harris relented. Kamala did not want to shake things up. She thought that she thought that what she could do is install certain people into leadership roles to make sure that she got the campaign that she wanted. said the operative close to the campaign. Others say that because of the structure of the complicated campaign, there was no way to turn O'Malley Dillon out. Her critics cite her leadership and the implosion of Beto O'Rourke's 2020 Democratic primary campaign, which raised 6.1 million on its first day, but ended months later due to major financial strain as a precursor to this campaign. So you hired O'Malley Dillon, and she fucked another campaign's finances up, and then you put her on this team, and she fucked your finances up. That's shocking. Imagine if O'Malley Dillon had been a part of Kamala Harris's staff and the mess she would have created for the whole entire country. How you fuck up a $6.1 million campaign and then get hired again and then fuck up her campaign? It's shocking. But of course, because of the identity politics and people and what people you want to put people in that are so-called experienced, and because she's a woman we need to hire more women in diverse roles, and I'm like, you had a $6.1 million treasury campaign and you couldn't be responsible for that shit. That's problematic. Goes back to high school. If I put you in charge of the candy money and we're trying to raise money for our campaign and you're skimming off the top of that money, or you fuck it up because due to mismanagement, who do you think's going to have to take the blame for that? That's money that you were the gatekeeper of that shit. So where do you think the responsibility is going to go? If I can't manage money, then I can't be put in charge of managing to be a CEO if I can't be a good CFO. You know, O'Malley Dillon's critics say she was insular and wanted to own all the decision making, creating a bottleneck. So basically, her trying to be a boss bitch was causing all this tension within the campaign. Her wanting all of the power concentrated to her. So basically, O'Malley Dillon was a self serving person. She wanted to be the one that called all the shots instead of working with people. It wanted to own all of the decision making, creating a bottleneck. In her role, she had centralized a major part of the Democratic Party's power. She was effectively the head of the White House political arm, was in control of decision making at the DNC, despite Jamie Harrison serving as its official leader, according to two sources familiar, chaired the campaign's political operation. When it was clear Harris's brother-in-law, Tony West, would be a dominating force on the campaign, O'Malley Dillon was initially welcoming. Two people with an understanding of the dynamic said, but then she tried to box him out by picking his chief of staff for him and pushing West to travel the country as a surrogate. A source familiar said they brought in their own chief who they had a long standing relationship with, after being provided a senior advisor. Hmm. Seems like she wanted to be the one that called all the shots. And isn't this indicative of campaigns with Democratic officials where they're all trying to cut throat or cut each other out or something? And it seems like the Democratic Party does this all the time. Before the election, O'Malley Dillon told multiple people that she would not seek another role in government even if Harris won, according to sources. Flattery, Foulhardy, who is a major O'Malley Dillon ally, disparaged Harris and her team. Three people familiar with his behavior said, though no one wanted to specify what he said, another the digital team lacking direction was a mischaracterization. We had pretty clear directive of what needs to get done, and we did what we could within the context of the confines that we were operating in. The morning after the election, department heads met with the teams to prepare them for the reality that they had lost. To open the meeting, Falhardy said there were strong headwinds against us, and it would have been even worse if it wasn't for us. Some perceived the remark as callous and detached from the gravity of the loss. The culture of the campaign was also a problem, said four Democrats after melding the Biden loyalists with Harris' longtime aides and new hires. The group wanted to move on from July's drama, but campaign aides and outsiders complained to notice for months that there was a lack of a defined leadership structure. Black aides felt routinely mistreated and demoralized. Multiple people told notice. Some had even wanted to make formal complaints and refrained for fear of retaliation. That's a big red flag. And this is what got me caught into reading this article. Black aides felt routinely mistreated. And then doesn't that go back to the other article that was written of why Simone Sanders had left due to the infighting in the vice president's office? And it had something to do with the chief of staff Sheila Nix and Tina Flournoy. And Tina Flournoy, of course, she was her chief of staff, and there was infighting, of course, in her campaign. Well, not just in her campaign, but also in her office, and that's one of the reasons why Simone Sanders had left, of course. And even this was another article from CNN. Let me see if I could share this. Let me see if I could share it. So, of course, here, I'm going to go back a little bit. It's from November 18, 2021. So we got like a year in. Exasperation and dysfunction inside Kamala Harris' frustrating start as vice president. Worn out by what they see as entrenched dysfunction and lack of focus, key West Wing aides have largely thrown up their hands at Vice President Kamala Harris and her staff, deciding there simply isn't time to deal with them right now, especially at a moment when President Joe Biden faces quickly multiplying legislative and political concerns. The exasperation runs both ways, with nearly 3 dozen former and current Harris aides, administration officials, Democratic operative, donor, outside advisors who spoke extensively reveal a complex reality inside the White House. Many in the vice president's circle fume that she's not being adequately prepared or positioned, and instead is being sidelined. The vice president herself has told several confidants she feels constrained in what she's able to do politically, and those around her remain weary of even hinting at multiple at future political ambitions, with Biden's team highly attuned to signs of disloyalty, particularly from the vice president. She's a heartbeat away from the presidency. She could be just a year away from launching a presidential campaign of her own. This was said in 2021 that there was no loyalty between Biden's team and Harris's team. This was said in 2021. Right there, November 18th, 2021. Few of the insiders who spoke said she's being well prepared for whichever role it will be. Harris is struggling with a rocky relation with some parts of the White House, while longtime supporters feel abandoned and see no coherent public sense of what she's done or been trying to do as vice president, being the first woman and first woman of color in a national elected office is historic, but has also come with outside scrutiny. No forgiveness for even small errors, as she'll often point out. She's perceived to be in such a weak position that top Democrats in and outside of White Washington had begun to speculate privately, asking each other why the White House has allowed her to become so hobbled in the public consciousness. At least as they see it, she's very honored and very proud to be vice president. Her job as the number two is to be helpful and supportive to the president and take on work that she asked her to take on. So basically, she was the help. She was the help. This white man propped her up, and of course, because of it, it just did not work in her favor. Not being put in positions to lead, Harris has also complained to confidants about not being a greater part of the president's approach to the Afghanistan withdrawal. But I mean, if you think about it, of course, it's going to look that way. And I'm not saying, when I said in the previous video that I made about the election, is that there's nothing more disrespectful than when two white men when a white man puts a black woman in position of power, And she's basically being put in a position where she's completely powerless and limited in what she could do, and then is actually at the behest of somebody that is completely incompetent. And it was offensive, and I'm like, how do black folks actually come into this idea that this is what leadership looks like, that she was ready for the presidency because she was the vice president, but the vice president doesn't have much power. It's like taking a position and being the cleanup person, the person that cleans up the other person's incompetency. And that's exactly why Joe Biden did what he did. He made the mess. She came in to clean it up. The culture of the campaign was also a problem, said 4 Democrats. And we talk about the black AIDS yet again. The treatment of black AIDS. You talk about being a leader for everybody and being accountable, and that Donald Trump was this bad guy, but yet inside your own house, you had black AIDS being mistreated. It's kind of like the church, right? They want to point out your sins. They want to point out how you fell from grace. But when you look inside their house, they're an even bigger demon than you initially thought, or didn't assume they were. Everybody got that one preacher that they thought didn't have demons, didn't have vices. But the problem with the Harris campaign is they ran off this feel good idealism that they're for everybody and that they're for the working class and that they're for other people. But it would have been a mess as she was elected, and she wouldn't have been able to handle it properly. So I don't see how there was ever really an honest choice amongst either choosing Vice President Harris or choosing Donald Trump. And unfortunately, for some people, our two-party system doesn't really function to the way that it should. And that's why we get the leaders that we get. Says senior aides to Harris pushed the campaign and the DNC to have a Palestinian speaker on stage at the August convention, trying to further the goodwill Harris had earned from the Arab and Muslim communities various over Gaza, but they were denied. One person said it was at the behest of the national security team. Wrong move. Wrong move. And that's why you lost Detroit. That's why you lost Wisconsin. The second campaign staffer said aides had gallows humor and some had a 9 to 5 work mentality. See what's up here. Harris hired an onslaught of high-profile operatives from former President Barack Obama's successful 2008 and 2012 campaigns, hoping they could harness the late summer excitement and turn it into a winning outcome. But many saw the additions of Pollock and others as just a backup for O'Malley Dillon, as they had all come from Obama world. And I want to really sideline this for a moment too. Um, this need for the Democratic Party to run on this Obama era, Obama style of campaigning is what's frightening. I do truly believe that Obama should have stayed out of politics after he was done his presidency. He should have stayed away from it. You shouldn't endorse anybody. You shouldn't speak on behalf of anybody. You shouldn't do anything. Stay out of politics. You're done. You're good. Best thing would have been to do for local for his campaign would be to endorse local, try and influence people in the local arena and understand them. But on a national level, Obama is seen as somebody that is toxic to the Democratic Party because he abandoned a lot of working class individuals in the Midwest. And a lot of people see him as a hypocrite because he couldn't have strategically won the presidency without the Midwest and without those battleground states that he had. But of course, because he did what he did, he was able to win 2 terms in the White House. But I just think hindsight is 2020. Obama shouldn't have been nowhere near Harris's campaign. And I think that's what hurt her. And it's also the comments that he made, the statements that he made to black men, and was problematic, and it might have done a lot of damage to his campaign. I mean, her campaign. You going somewhere to lecture, going to Pittsburgh, lecturing black men about not setting out the campaign. I think that was troubling from the beginning. Once you made those statements, you didn't get that. The electorate probably went the other way, and no one was willing to check Obama when he said certain things. And also, there were certain things that Michelle Obama had said, which she had no business saying to people, talking about your rage hurts people like me. Think about your daughters. All this shaming and painting an electorate with a broad stroke kind of turned people off from the Democratic Party. People got tired of it. You can't depend on the same tactics. And that's what Obama really forgot. And of course, he was shocked because the Democrats had lost, but his legacy is now done because he realizes now he no longer has that power to influence. And if he does influence it, people will run away from it because certain people in the electorate do not like Obama anymore because they knew what his presidency was all about. You know, there was no one who had a different viewpoint, and anybody who had a different viewpoint was always sidelined. And that's another point. Remember when I said in the previous video that Democrats are the most tolerant, intolerant people? when you have a viewpoint that doesn't align with theirs, they sideline you or they put you to the side. I've had that done to me before too. I'd say certain things or I make certain statements and they'd be like, okay, we'll call you. Or they'll sideline you because your statements don't line up with theirs. It always has to be this moving as a unit type of thing with Democrats. You know, and I think if you don't move as a unit, they'll try to find ways to try and push you out of the political party. The most tolerant, intolerant group of people to be around is Democrats. Sideline. Said the opposite close to the campaign days since the blowout election, Democrats have criticized Paula's focus on white people in the suburbs and moderates calling the strategies like small intimate town halls with former Representative Liz Cheney a failure since Harris with Republicans or people in the suburbs, though she did not increase her numbers with college educated white women. And that's another place where she really went wrong, lining herself up with Liz Cheney. Liz Cheney is a warmonger. Her father and all the other people were responsible for deaths in Iraq and Afghanistan. They were a part of that. They were warmongers. And she lined herself up with Liz Cheney thinking that she could reach across the aisle and get Democratic vote, Republican votes, excuse me. And it didn't work. It was like they were looking, they were hoeing for votes, basically. I saw that too, and I knew it would never work. David Pauloff comes up a lot in this article because he's a part of the Obama regime. So they wanted to run campaigns like a 2008 campaign. And the electorate was smarter than that. We're not in 2008 no more. That was 16 years ago. And 2000 and what made 2008 different from 2024 is the fact that in 2008 we barely had social media. Social media was starting to become a thing. And like I said, people weren't on social media that much in 2008. Some had YouTube, others had Facebook, but Facebook and YouTube were just the only two places, and maybe MySpace for some the OGs. But you couldn't run a campaign like 2008 because people are not stupid anymore. It used to be you could put up it's just like with YouTube, you got to be more sophisticated. A cat video today is not going to get a million views that it got in 2005 and 2008. It's not going to get it no more. YouTube changes, YouTube shifts, things are different. People got millions of choices to choose from on YouTube. So people ain't going to be on YouTube where you could just put up a simple video and people are going to go, like going back to the whole thing with Obama Girl and the whole music video, I Got a Crush on Obama. That worked in 2007, 2008. It was the popular thing because it took Obama from this place of just being simply a black candidate to being a popular person that everybody loved, white and black. And social media was a great equalizer of that. But why didn't it work for Kamala Harris? Because Kamala Harris is too stiff. And she also did not have enough time to really be in those vulnerable places, to see her without the pantsuit on. And that's one of the things that I've been saying for a long time. Like, we don't want to see a woman in some pantsuits, because we don't want our leaders looking like that. Like, you're a woman, so we should see you in a vulnerable place where you're taking care of your family. We want to see that, but we didn't see that from her. We all seen the strong male-like leadership shit, and that she was ready to lead, and we're going to run you as the prosecutor and not as a simple woman who has a family. And I told you about them pantsuit wearing types. They don't know how to be like, you know, you could still be powerful and still be feminine. But you don't get that in the United States, especially with female leaders. You always see this whole, Sheryl Sandberg lean in type bullshit from female elected leaders. And it just doesn't work. People are turned off by that shit. Nobody wants to see that. He said David Pollack wanted to run a 2008 campaign for a 2024 election. The operative said he wanted to win the middle. He wanted to win white moderates. He wanted to have people in the Harris campaign went into election night confident that it outworked its opponent. It had massive numbers to point to, including 90,000 volunteers over the weekend, knocking on 3 million doors. But four sources who Notice spoke to said getting the volunteer program to capacity was difficult. Trump's campaign outsourced much of his door knocking operation, which drew its own headlines. Still, that campaign was successful. Sources who spoke to Notice say volunteers did not have proper talking points or literature until late into the campaign. And this is what makes it different. This is what makes a very big difference. When you're switching the candidates out, remember everything goes with it. That means you got to switch out ballots, take names off of ballots, take campaign, and take volunteers from one party, from one administration to the next to work for them to campaign. It probably was a big mess, and she didn't know how to handle it. You know. And then it says more than 1.5 million yard signs weren't printed until late October. You waited until late October to print yard signs. There weren't basic reporting structures for organizers and volunteers in states until the end. It was not until around 5 weeks before the election that any of the states hit their voter contact goals. One person familiar with the operations told Notice some volunteers had to organize themselves and scripts were asinine, with some having to be approved by O'Malley Dillon and asking the voter, do you know there's a presidential election this year? An all-staff call on Thursday infuriated dejected staffers as O'Malley Dillon praised the data team and described the outcome as close when Harris in reality lost every battleground state. She said that she too needed to find a new job. To the dismay of already disgruntled employees, she defended their strategy with the fact that because Harris lost more in left-leaning states like New York and New Jersey than in battleground states, it showed that their efforts worked in places where they were focused. No, it didn't. O'Malley Dillon needs to stay the fuck away from politics. Like, seriously. Like, How you mess up Beto O'Rourke's campaign and then you get hired again? In politics, if you fuck up once, you don't get a second chance. But you mean to tell me this woman got another second chance to fuck up somebody else's campaign? And she's the campaign manager? She has no business being in politics. I can tell you that. And she defended that strategy with the fact she lost New York and New Jersey in the battleground states. That's bad. That's real bad. And those are Democratic strongholds. I'm like, how the fuck did you lose New York and New Jersey? Even though you got it narrowly, but damn, it would have been worse if New York and New Jersey turned red. That would have been a ass whooping to look back at for days. The fact that she lost more states outside of battleground states is an indictment of every other part of the campaign. One Democrat who heard her remarks told Notice, noting the lack of branding, communication, ability to separate Harris from Biden. Until the end, they were projecting confidence, said the operative close to the campaign, but the data was wrong. The highest turnout based on early voting data. On a staff call Friday before the election that was attended by senior leadership, campaign leaders projected confidence that they would win based on the early voting models. When you look at the results on Tuesday, you quickly found out they were completely wrong. But once again, the analytics fail, and somehow we still don't learn from it. The campaign maintains that leadership always conveyed that the race was within the margin of error. And it was. And when you're polling 47-47 or 48 to 47, I mean, that's a slight edge, but it's not a big edge. And when it was 47-47, that was dead. It was razor thin. That's when everybody should have been worried. But everybody said she was going to win. Everybody had this, yeah, she going to win. She going to win this. And then the data turned out to be wrong again. I.e., didn't learn from Hillary Clinton. When y'all thought that Hillary Clinton was up in the polls and that she was going to win, she was 10 points ahead of Trump. After the Hollywood tape scandal with Trump saying grab him by the pussy, he still won. He still won. Because in reality, don't nobody care about that. It's, can I put bills? Can I feed my kids? Can I put bills on the table? The data team also worked in an insular fashion. Aides complained multiple departments whose work would have benefited from it didn't always have access to polling information. When concerns were raised about negative Trump ad that slammed Harris for her position on taxpayer funds, the fund to pay for surgeries for incarcerated transgender people, Deputy Campaign Manager Quentin Folks told people that based on the campaign's research, it wasn't having much effect. The campaign clarified that it broadly did not see voters moving over the anti-trans attacks. And folks who runs paid media said they did not need to go up with an ad to defend it. It ended up being one of Trump campaign's most successful ads to cascade Harris as a dangerous liberal. Harris is not without her own blame. People say she refused the distance from Biden despite voters showing how unhappy they were with the status quo. She failed to provide a clear rationale for why she wanted to be president, but aides hope that over time Harris won't bear the brunt of the blame for this devastating loss. But then it goes back to the whole question that Sonny Holston asked on The View, right? Where she said, if you were president, what would you have done differently than Biden? And when she said, I can't think of anything, that's when she lost. Right there. Right there. A refusal to distance yourself from Biden, but also her going completely dark by October. Her going in the direction of trying to destroy Donald Trump and attack him even after he had had 2 assassination attempts against him. It just didn't work in her favor. And she lost because her team put her in an uncontrollable position. She became the help. She became the person to clean up Biden's mess. And he didn't care, because if you look at it at the end of the day, the 2 white men, one, he got to be president, Biden got to be president, she got to be vice president, and he gets to be president again. And I want you to watch on Inauguration Day when she's standing outside with Douglas Emhoff and she got to shake the new president's hand. And then also watch her when she's being, really watch her once she sees the new president getting sworn in. It's going to be a bitter pill for her to swallow, that she has to sit in the back of all these white men and she lost the election. It's going to be a bitter pill to swallow. Just like it was for Hillary. She'll have to walk the plank. But I'm done talking about this election. I mean, the mismanagement of money is just like, she's $20 million in debt. I don't know how the hell she's going to climb out of that, not unless she does private consultancy, or she goes to the consultancy realm. She could really do a lot there. But she'll always have a job. She just won't be president of the United States. So that's cool. But other than that, I thank you for watching Media Talks TV. It's been great dialogue. I'm going to be going back to making some videos next week, regular videos. I won't be on live stream. But, thank you for tuning in. If you're new here and you're watching, please hit the like, share, and subscribe. I got more videos coming. We're going to be doing some more videos soon. So make sure you stay tuned. I'm going to get get to bed because I'm tired. Shit. Man, it was great talking to you guys. It's my 3rd stream, number 3. I'm going to try and do as many streams as possible, but word permits me, I will do it. This has been Media Talks TV with your host, Tony J. I'm out. Peace.